Hello everyone and welcome to my review for Kengan Omega Chapter 136. I was very worried waiting for this chapter to come out. I was afraid that the fight was going to end this week, which would have been bad. There would have been not nearly enough build up to it for it to end this week. And I was very happy to find out that it didn't. And then I was very happy to find out that it pretty much resolved all of the major issues that I had started to develop for the fight. I went over that in last week's review. You should check that out if you haven't already. That'll basically be a very in-depth description of my problems with the fight. But this chapter totally fixes it for a couple of reasons that I'll tell you about in a minute. Before that, I have to tell you about my wonderful patrons. Special thanks to Fuse, Neo, Dijon Redden, Anthony Chavez, Honey Mustard, Zach Rowitz, K-God, Chris Redfield, Scratch23, Rat, Ryzen 4K, Artist, Mac Campaign, Wave of Manga, Chuck Speed and Seed, and Jakester EZ. Thank you all very much for supporting me on Patreon. I greatly appreciate it. And if you too want to get a shout out at some point during videos, or access to reviews for Solo Leveling and The Boxer, you can always become a patron as well. There's a link to my Patreon down in the description. So, in summary, my biggest issues with the fight so far were that there wasn't any really serious escalation. Actually, that was pretty much the biggest issue, is that it just kind of felt like we were in the beginning stages of the fight for 5 chapters. And this chapter fixes that. I think we get 2 key turning points in this chapter. About 2, if you want to consider them like one extended scene. For starters, we get a big change in the choreography. Most of the fight has just been them doing this ultra close quarters striking combat, and it was pretty much them just doing that for many chapters, and a lot of people were not really a fan of that, even though, you know, technically very well done, good choreography. It was basically multiple chapters of just kind of the same thing for several weeks. And in this chapter, we actually get kind of more into like a ground game, which is very well choreographed. And then we get, you know, not quite the same stuff we were already getting, like a little bit of a mix-up, I guess. So we get a little bit of ground game. We have Oma using Weeping Willow to get Lolong off of him. He dislocated his arm to perform the throw using a redirection water kata technique called Bone Consumption, which has a dumb name, but, like, characters dislocating their arms to do stuff is something that happens all the time in Kengan, so that's, like, whatever. Then Lolong goes into a very compact stance. It looks like he's going in for a grapple, which he does. He manages to... he kind of a grapple. He tosses Oma onto the ground when he attempts to use Raging Fire, and then just kind of starts beating on Oma, gets him into a little bit of a grapple, and then uses a technique, his first name technique, I think, called Invisible Elbow, which is just an elbow from the blind spot. That's it. That's all there is to it. I love it. I love that description of it. There's not a bunch of, like, really complicated stuff involving how it works. It's a really simple technique. And that's something I really like about characters like Kuroki. It's what I like, what we get for some of the top tiers in Kengan, is it's just basics. It's just really basic fundamental stuff, but it's put into practice by people who have spent decades honing it. So it's great. It's top tier. I love it. I love this kind of stuff. And this elbow is powerful enough to cut Oma's chest open. Not super deep. I made the comparison to when Rahido cut open Falcon's chest. We actually get a reaction from Rahido here when this happens. But, you know, it's no Razor's Edge. But still, enough of those, Oma's going to have troubles using the advance. And he does start cutting him up with his elbows here. Now, some people were wondering, how the fuck is Lolong cutting him with his elbow? I understand if you hit someone, like, really hard with an elbow, you'll probably, like, break the skin or something. I mean, you'll do real fucking damage with an elbow. But, like, slicing a big gash along someone's a little weird. And I think some people forgot that at the end of round 4, Misasa literally cut Yumi's face open up the middle with an elbow. If Misasa can do it, Lolong can do it. So he starts slicing up Oma here. And then Oma goes in for the split-second advance to try and get a counter on Lolong. And Lolong was expecting him to do this. He was waiting for it. However, Lolong gets hit in the jaw by Oma going full output with the advance. Lolong is shook by this. He looks like Okubo after he got knocked out by Kano, and then he gets hit with redirection kata, change of scenery. Now I remember, this was a technique that Nico used when he saved Oma. There were a lot of people that were like, hey, hold on a second. We've never actually seen Oma use this technique. I think it's like one of the only techniques we've seen Nico use that we never saw Oma use. And because of how Nico used it, there were a lot of people that thought, oh shit, Oma could use this to get a ring out on someone. He could literally just throw them out of the ring. But instead, with the same amount of force you would use to throw a guy like 20 feet away, he slams Lolong into the ground. Back first. Fucking craters him. And everyone's like, holy shit, that's fucking nuts. However, there's a bit of a downside here. Oma has not trained himself in the usage of maximum output for the advance, which would make sense because it basically killed him. In the Annihilation Tournament, going full output with the advance basically killed him. So why would he practice with that? And a big part of Oma's character arc in the Annihilation Tournament was not relying on the advance anymore. Transformations are stupid. Use techniques. That was basically Oma's character arc during the Annihilation Tournament, was learning to trust and develop the Nico style. So that's what most of his fighting style is based around, and using the advance here is not played up as like the best move ever. It was basically something Oma did out of extreme desperation, and he basically used the absolute bare minimum amount to not cause like permanent damage to his heart. So that was a pretty good usage of it. And it's something where like Oma's not going to use this again for the rest of the fight. Like, it was a very desperate move on his part. So it's not coming out again. And then Lolong gets up. So this was our big turning point of the fight here, really. Is Lolong cuts Oma's chest open, Oma gets desperate, uses maximum output advance, smashes Lolong into the ground. There's your turning point right there. We finally got a big one. But Lolong gets up. And Lolong's like, yeah, I can keep going. And he smiles. He gives a nice little smile, not a big dumb jobber face smile that fucking haunts my dreams because Neve has done fucking edits of it for literally everything for the past 2 months. We're good. He's happy. It's like, you know, Ryan, remember when Ryan smiled towards the end of his fight with Oma? Remember how great that was? I couldn't help but think of that. And apparently now we're entering the final exchange as Oma is not going to use the advance anymore because he doesn't want to end up like Faye, but Lolong has taken serious damage. So who's going to win? We don't know. And that's pretty much how the fight's gone for its entirety, because we don't know who's going to win. I'll give credit to Sandrovich. He's done a very good job at creating some, actually I'd say a decent room for doubt for either side. Because having Oma win seems super fucking obvious, and I'm not personally in favor of it. However, it doesn't seem like in this chapter that Oma's guaranteed victory, because he basically used a trump card that he can't use again, and it didn't win him the match. So now who knows what's going to happen. Whereas Lolong, well, we've talked a lot about Lolong. He's been hyped up the whole tournament. He's putting up a really good fight against Oma, who's healthy. He's had training with the Kure clan. Oma's at his strongest, like as strong as he's ever been right now. And he's having a real goddamn fight with him. I don't know who's going to win. I want Lolong to win. I think it would be much more interesting for the story if Lolong wins. And it would also make his hype feel like it was paid off if he manages to beat Oma. If he loses, the hype falls flat. So hopefully he wins. But I'm very, very excited for next week's chapter. I don't know if it's going to end next week or the week after. It's possible they could split it up into two. I could definitely see them splitting up the next chapter between 2 weeks. Who knows? I feel like we probably will. I feel like this is going to go on for another 2 weeks. I don't know. Unless they release just like a really long chapter next week. They release the whole thing next week. We'll see. But once again, Chapter 136 basically fixed all the problems I had with this fight. And hopefully the finale will be really good. Because Sandrich has shown that when he wants to, he can do a really good job delivering on this kind of stuff. So, let's hope that he does. But with that, that's all I've got to say for this week's review. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. I do Kengan Omega chapter reactions and reviews every week. You should definitely be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And actually, if you think you're subscribed, to make sure that you are, because I have had actually a lot of people in the past who thought they were subbed but actually weren't. So make sure you check that, that little subscribe button underneath the video. Make sure you are indeed subbed to the channel. If you enjoy discussing Kengan Omega with other people, or you just enjoy the content I produce on this channel, I highly suggest you check out my Discord server. I have a link to that down in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys around. Take care.